Hello, everyone, and welcome to CoCreative NoCode's Office Hours, episode number 110. I am Tonya, your host, and I'm here with members Jay and Brittany and Thomas and Cameron and my Kim. And we're going to get started in just a moment here, but if it's your first time tuning into CoCreative NoCode's Office Hours, whether you're watching live on Facebook or the replay on YouTube, go ahead and please click that like button and subscribe on YouTube. Make sure those notifications are turned on so you don't miss anything from us. What Office Hours is we have our members come on to Zoom sessions that we then broadcast live and syndicate. And our members can ask us any question they want about Bubble. They can bring us a Bubble bug. They can bring us a Bubble feature request, whatever they want, as long as it's related to Bubble. We will cover it on Office Hours. But today's episode is a little bit different because we have a special guest. His name is Cameron Wilder Booth. Thank you for being here, Cameron.
Hello, thank you.
Yeah, and he is going to take us back to the beginning of when the API connector was super overwhelming and scary. And then he pushed through that and he came through on the other side, having made now, is it 2 apps that are really heavy API?
Total of 3 apps, actually.
Total of 3 API driven apps. And so he's going to take us through Google's YouTube API specifically for teaching purposes today. So we're super excited to have you here, Cameron. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Perfect. Well, we're going to go ahead and get started. But if you are watching this live and you would like to join us for an office hours session, this one or any office hours session, complimentary, just to see what it's all about, go ahead and comment on the video or send us an email to team@CoCreativeNoCode.com, and Kim and I will get you credentials to join us as soon as possible. So I'm going to turn things over. I'm going to stop sharing, and Cameron, you can start sharing, and I'm looking forward to hearing everything. So
awesome. Yes.
Take over.
Looking forward to. Cool. Well, hello, everybody. As Tonya had said, my name is Cameron. I'm going to start sharing my screen here. Give me 1 second.
Yep.
Okay, cool. So I have all of this popped up. So yeah, my name is Cameron. I've been working on Bubble development since early-ish April. I tinkered a little bit with it in 2020, just a little bit, but 2021 has really been where I've actually been using the program and working towards making apps for clients, myself, businesses that I work with, and so on. I think it should go without saying, or it should go with saying, actually, that I'm still very much on the Bubble journey. I'm not an expert like Tonya when it comes to everything and anything, but in APIs, especially, it's one of those things where I do have some insight onto starting off, how do I do this? It looks scary. What is all this code that I'm seeing? What is JSON and what is REST and so on and so forth. And so I want to provide you my perspective on how I sort of began and sort of how I figured things out. And of course, I used the Bubble forms. There are some amazing people out there that helped me step by step. But after those questions aren't asked on the forms and the answers aren't there, you start having to think, okay, how do I do this? I did it like this. So how does this translate to this new app? I've worked initially starting off my project journey with YouTube. I created some stuff for content creators that they wanted a YouTube challenge. So I had to figure out how to use the API and then how to actually scan videos from users and acknowledge the fact that they uploaded with certain hashtags and so on and so forth. I moved on to Shopify, where I actually was able to split products from collections and then assign images that had the same SKU as those products and then re-upload them back to Shopify. And then lastly, the last project I worked on, which was very API dependent, pulled data from ticketing platforms for a customer service business, looking at Zendesk, Gorgeous, Reamaze, some ticketing platforms, and then also compared this data to the time that the agents worked using a Hubstack tool. So 4 APIs just right there, and then with more to come. So I've been experimenting and sort of dealing with this API stuff for a while. And I feel like YouTube's a really good place to start because Google has, of course, a lot of documentation. And also just everybody uses Google. Once you get Google, your app can do so many things and it can go so many places. And so on this screen that I have here, I have Google Places with repeating group repeating group data. I have the actual YouTube API, and then I have the Reddit API. And so I just want to go over, everything here, but mainly focusing on YouTube. And so I think this is a good place to start. So as we all know,
Awesome.
definitely. If you have any questions at any time, just throw them out there. I talk a lot. So, just cut me off. It's not a problem.
Okay. I will.
Yeah, definitely. No worries. So let's start with the YouTube API. So YouTube and Google are pretty crazy. Just yesterday, I was actually building this out. I was like, okay, so I need to show you guys how to do this and this and this. I was building it out and I was running into so many issues, which is definitely in line with Google, at least in my personal experience. Even if you know what you're doing, Google will still give you errors. And I say this with confidence. You could be the most tenured veteran API person out there, and you can just experience Google's API firsthand, and it'll throw errors at you for no reason. I've determined that most of these errors are because of, authentication issues, where, let me explain, when you're on their playground, so there is something called the playground that Google offers, where you basically can actually run through certain APIs and you can actually use your code. And what I've experienced is that the code on the playground will say it's not working, where it actually does inside Bubble, which is the weirdest thing ever. And I was dealing with this for an hour and a half yesterday going, what is not working? And it
That's
turns
bizarre.
out, it turns out it is Google. So all of the API projects I've worked on have always had amazing documents, especially for, developing. So Google has it, Shopify has it, Spotify has it, and any and everybody, for the most part, has this documentation that you're going to be able to run through and see how to do certain things. And with Google in particular, they want you to make sure that you're following the rules and that you're keeping you and your customers secure. It's their data. They don't want it being leaked. They want you to use it the way that they intended. So it is definitely always super, super important to consult that documentation. Now, for the most part, it's pretty straightforward, though. As it shows you here at the very beginning when you start, what you're going to want to do, which is the scariest part, I think, of all APIs, is the OAuth, or the authentication of your user. It is the part where the most work goes into it. But once you're done with that, then you can take all of the data that you want from anywhere, basically. And to do that with Google in particular, you do have to create you have to create an authentication flow. And to do that, you do have to have a console.cloud.google.com. This is where you and your project are going to live on Google's end. What we're doing is we're creating a project or a specific key for Google on their server. So when we reference it, it says, oh yes, this person or this project is valid, it's authentic. We'll go ahead and pass this data back and forth. And it's the only way that you really can do anything with an API, especially if you're working with any other apps as well. You're always going to need to create an app on their service. And it could be, like in Google's case, right here on their Google Cloud platform, where you can create the app. Or let's say it's through Shopify. You have to go through partners.shopify.com, where all the developers hang out. You have to create an app there. But once you successfully created an app, it is going to give you a client ID and it's going to give you a client secret.
You have a really large screen, Cameron.
Oh, yes. Okay. Yes, I do have a very large screen, especially when you're working with so many projects. I have 35 inches, I think. So I, sometimes get lost.
I can see it better now. Thank you.
Cool. Sweet. Yeah. So hopefully you're able to read some stuff now. Yes. Like I was saying, when you're on their dashboards or you're creating their apps, once you have successfully created an app, it is going to give you a client ID and a client secret. You're going to want to hold on to this information because it's pretty important for the actual process. And then also some other really important things for your APIs are the URIs. I did some research, Tonya. URIs is a unique resource identifier. So it's a bit different than a URL. It is actually I believe what I remember is a superset of the URL, which means it's sort of like the parent and then the URL is the child to it.
Okay.
So with this, obviously, it's going to be a little different through every platform in their application creation process, but you're going to be asked to create URIs for use with requests from a browser. So which URI is it coming from? And in this case, now you'll actually see I have 3 of them. I have my actual app here. I have Bubble.io, and then I have the Bubble apps, where once you actually do the preview, it loads Bubble apps and so on and so forth. And the reason I've done this is just to doubly ensure, or triply ensure, I guess, that I'm doing it correctly. You could probably delete these 2 and it would still work. But in my experience, especially with Google, it does not hurt to definitely, branch out, make sure you're covering all of the areas. And then lastly, you are going to need to create a redirect URI. And I'll definitely explain how important this is. I'll show you how important this is. But this is after you make a request to the server, it's going to then send your user, whoever is trying to authenticate, back to this page. And I have it as a redirect. And in the redirect query, it's actually going to have certain information that's appended to this information. So we're going to see in just a little bit how it's going to show this exactly, but it's going to have like an and it's going to have like a code equals blah, 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 expiration equals blah, blah, blah. And this information is actually what starts the entire process. We're going to be parsing through that URL to take certain information and then send it through our API connector. So the system recognizes us, that we are, like I said earlier, actually valid and authentic here. Last but not least, for Google in particular, you need an OAuth consent screen. And this is basically just a way, when you're logging into any service using Google or Facebook, a screen pops up and you get to access your account. This is what that is. So this is actually where you're going to select the user. Google is very interesting. In my experience, I've used Google, like I said, for that one project. We had over 300 people sign up for that project. And you'll notice here, we have a test user or a user cap for Google. And one of the things between most of these platforms is that, there are going to be some kind of limits until your application is public, where it's been verified by this service or whichever service you're building with, for it to be, recognized as non-dangerous, as compliant, and as valid. So we're going to be focusing on this email address today as the test user. And I can actually show you what's going to happen when we don't use a test user. But apart from that, real quick, I'm just going to show you another very important thing. So we have the app domain, where we're selecting that this is the application that we're going to be using. And again, in most platforms, you're always going to have the home page where you're going to be selecting or inputting, rather, your homepage for your application. It just lets the service know where it should be looking. And if a request comes from a different area, it knows that it's, not valid and it's not going to send that data. I do have my authorized domains. Again, I do include 2. We really only need this one as far as I know. I do this just to be, doubly secure. I am the developer, so on and so forth. And then the scopes. This is the part where all APIs, when you're developing anything, you want to make sure that you are using the right scopes. And the scopes is just a fancy way of saying, what information are you going to be taking from this server or from this application? And so this applies to all APIs, where it's going to ask you, do you want to read certain information? Do you want to write certain information? For this in particular, for YouTube, so I have selected the YouTube data API. I have gone into Google. I have authorized my APIs. I've enabled it, rather, and it has that blue button where it says enable. And in fact, I should be able to show you quickly just after this how exactly I did that. But you are then going to add or remove scopes, and I've selected these scopes. In particular, I have selected read-only YouTube. I don't want to write to my YouTube. I don't want to create videos, and I don't want to create comments or anything for this example in particular. So for just this, we're taking data and we're going to be reading it, which then gives us the option to display it on our web app. And of course, I'm taking the email and profile. for the user, because I want us to know which user we're dealing with. So these are the 3 scopes that I'm using for YouTube. So if you're going to be creating a YouTube app where you want to pull data into your service and you want to display certain statistics and so on and so forth, you can use these 3. You can also use the YouTube's analytics API if you want even more in-depth analytics. But for this case, this will suffice for showing us likes, views, subscribers, and all of the really just super or topical statistics. It doesn't go super in depth, but this is how you would do it. So you just make sure that these scopes are selected. And like I had said, in any service or any other web service that you're building, so not Google, maybe it's like Shopify or so on, you're also going to be asked to create or add your scopes. And so when we do that, save and continue, yep, that's me. And then now our app is basically ready to be called. We do have to wait a couple moments for it to propagate through the system, but it's pretty quick to do so. And then real quick, I want to show you. So I'm going to type in YouTube API. I'm using the data. And so when I go here, there would be a button here that says enable. I would just click enable. And then at that point, I can actually use the scopes that populate on that list I had just shown you. I'll be able to select them. Otherwise, if this isn't enabled, it won't show up on that list.
So, that's important to know.
It is. Yeah, you have to make sure that these, especially for Google services, that whatever tool you're using has been enabled. It's the only way it'll show up. But what's really cool is that it does have this option, try this API. So we can actually try this API and we can go here and we can figure out exactly how things work. And perfectly, it actually brings us to the OAuth 2.0 authentication. So how do we do it? What exactly is the right way to start using our API? So we've created the API in our backend dashboard. We've created the app and we have the credentials here. So this is my YouTube test here. Just to show you, again, I went to credentials and we can actually, if we wanted to create a new one, we would just create credentials. And for this in particular, because it is OAuth client, we are going to be taking data from a web server and we are going to be using it. We would then use the OAuth client ID. On this page here, back on my bubble, I do have the Google Places and repeating group data. And this is taking data from the Maps API. If you've ever done anything, whether it's web work or whether it's a bubble app where you use a Google map, it's going to ask you for a Google Maps API key. And you would just create it by simply going to API key. You can see it is slightly different. It asks you, you know, to name it, of course, it gives you just an API key, no secret, unlike the API OAuth screen. It asks you, you know, where do you want to restrict it? And then, of course, what APIs do you want to have it associated with? So this is slightly different, but this is one of the only steps you need to do for an API key, at least for with Google Maps. So if I was to type in, let's say, batteries, because for some reason batteries are on my mind, I need to get new batteries for my smoke alarm. It would show batteries near me. I have already set something in the repeating group that shows that it's taking data from my address, but it is referencing this API key to pull that data. But I don't want to get too sidetracked or too off topic. I just want to show you the differences. So with this, we have this application pulled up. I'm going to actually use this documentation to show you how to get it started. It'll, of course, walk through my bubble, my API connector, but I do want to show you how exactly I found this data and how to find this information. And so to start, I'm going to type in Google OAuth 2.0, and it's going to pull up exactly this, using OAuth 2.0 to access Google's APIs. Super awesome. It links us to Google's documents. And this is where all of the fun starts. Now, it does require a lot of reading. And if you're impatient like me, you're going to just skim through it and you're going to be like, okay, I need to find all of the information that's necessary. Which is ironic because all of this information is truly necessary. It shows you how things are going to work and how things are actually sort of connected with one another. It goes over the information that you need here. So I'm going to pull open my plugins here. And dun dun, this is where everybody either makes it or breaks. This is, you look at this and you're like, hey, I'm sort of scared, or you're like, no biggie. I'm trying to make my screen a little bit taller, but I can't seem to do that. There we go. Okay. Before I begin, any questions? Because I've been talking for a while.
Nope. So far, everything makes sense to me. Any questions from the rest of the gallery here?
Okay, nope. Cool. No worries.
Look it. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, no worries.
I know sometimes when you're going through this stuff, it's like, is anybody listening? It can feel weird. Like, yeah. It's so quiet.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that I'm not going over anybody or rather saying something and not making sense. And you know how it is. But okay, cool. So we are here trying to find the right, let's see. Let's do YouTube. OAuth 2.0. And I'm going to go down here. Okay, cool. So to note, there are different flows for what you're trying to do. We are going to be working on server-side flow here today for YouTube Data API. And this is, as it says, it supports web applications that can securely store persistent information. Whereas there are client-side, installed application, and device flow. All of these are going to have different methods of actually using the API, or at least authenticating. For us, in this instance, we are going to be talking to the server directly. So we are going to be responsible for the API information. That would be the access token and the refresh token, and making sure that we handle those. Whereas in the client side, typically you would not be responsible for that information. It would just allow you to basically start going right away. So server side, we are responsible for the accessing and storing of this information. And then, of course, as I had said, all this documentation is super awesome. It's going to run through how you should do it. You want to open up the API library, go to credentials, everything I just said.
Did that look like
what's that?
Was that hard to read at first?
It definitely was. Yes, absolutely. And especially with the stress of the initial project that I was going into. So It was pretty crazy. I would say the best way to start with APIs is to think of something that you want to do with a service that you really enjoy. And YouTube is one for a lot of people that like YouTube videos. It makes sense.
Yeah, for sure.
Another one is, let's say, Reddit or Twitter or even Shopify. You have a Shopify store. You're like, oh, well, it'd be really cool if I could pull all of my, my products into a repeating group and see all their stuff. And this is really good ways of just getting used to the API connector. But yes, definitely starting off, this documentation was pretty crazy. Fortunately, I'm here. We'll be able to skip most of this crazy stuff and we'll go into why we're doing it and how we're doing it. And so we're going to right to step one. We're setting authorization parameters. We've already done everything else that it said, which was, of course, get our API and OAuth screen. So now we're going to be dealing with what is called HTTP/REST. This is what the API connector does. We are sending and receiving JSON data. And so this is how we're going to be doing it. Fortunately, it has right here the endpoint that we want to actually talk to. So accounts.google.com/o, so on and so forth. This is the URL that we are going to be adding all of this data to. So client ID, redirect URI, response type, scope. And what's cool about Google is that, especially for YouTube, it shows you these are the scopes that you're going to be using or that you can use, which hopefully clarifies the reason why I picked some of the scopes that I had on this screen over here, because YouTube basically told me to. So that's how I knew. It wasn't just magic. I didn't guess or anything. It's because YouTube down here is like, hey, this is how you view your YouTube account. And I was like, oh, okay. So I'm going to use this scope, YouTube.read only. And that's how it works, or worked for me. So
awesome.
Yeah, super cool that they have this documentation because it can get very, very crazy. So what we're going to do, and it says, this is how we want to set it up. This is like, look at this information. This is what you're going to be referencing. But then we get to the good part where we actually can start with the process of creating the first part of using the API. And as most services have, they have a walkthrough that shows similarly what to call. There are some services that do not, such as Reddit. I was dealing with Reddit the other day. I was like, it would be really cool to experience or experiment with Reddit. And they actually don't really have anything outlined as well as Google. And so it took a little bit, but I did get it. But that's because I had information and knowledge in the past using like sort of Google's template. But you can see here, so this is a sample redirect to Google's authorization server. It's saying what we need to include. We need to include a scope. We need to include an access type. We need to include granted scopes equals true, the state, the redirect URI, the response type, and the client ID. So let's break this down. What exactly is the scope? What is the access type? So on and so forth. The scope is exactly as we had gone over. It is going to be what allows us, or it's going to be what data is given to us. So we're saying we want YouTube read-only data. So we want data from this YouTube account. That's the only data that we're going to get using our authentication process or using our API. The access type, it should be noted that the access type equals offline for a very specific purpose. And that is because there is an expiration to every access token given to you. Well, at least for server side, in this case, flows, where your access token does have an expiration date. So if you're trying to use it and it expires, then you can't use it anymore. It's just a fancy way of keeping, I guess, the client, or in this case, the service's data secure. So it can't be just continuously ran. Include granted scopes. This is not unique to Google, but definitely Google has it while others don't. And this is just saying, yes, we're using these scopes listed here. The state is, it could be considered a nonce, which is a fancy way of saying a unique string. I was dealing with Shopify months ago and it had a nonce instead of a state. And I had to figure out what that was. And it really is whatever you assign it, whatever you want. And I'll show you in just a little bit when we actually go into the what I had created, where this is just a random string. And this random string, while important for unique individuals, is if you're using it in the case that I'm going to show you, isn't super important, but it ensures that there's no cross-site phishing or anything of the sort, where it's basically ensuring that this thumbprint is this thumbprint. And so pretty important for if you're dealing with a lot of different clients. And then, of course, the redirect URI. Where are we sending this user with our the URI? Where are we sending them once they authorize on our server? The response type equals code, because that's what we're going to be getting. And then lastly, our client ID, which is going to be located here for Google services inside our console. So it is very, very easy to fill this information out. It's also very, very easy to do it incorrectly. I have come across myself, there were instances where I had entered all this information perfectly and I threw it inside the API, or inside Bubble rather, and it didn't work and it said all this information was wrong. And it turns out the reason being is because when you copy and paste this, here, let me show you. So when you copy and paste this, what's going to end up happening is it's going to have a bunch of spaces. And so especially if you do it on a text editor and you try to eliminate those spaces, sometimes you don't. So you have to be just pretty, I guess, just cognizant of the fact that there are spaces, and you do need to delete them like this and make sure that there are no spaces. So let's go ahead while I have us all here. I'm going to make sure that all these spaces are eliminated. So this looks pretty ugly, I agree. What we're gonna do while I have you here, we're gonna actually take this data, we're gonna do what we need to do with it. So I'm going to start by modifying the state parameter. And like I said, this is just a unique code that you can give it. So let's do 117xxx, why not? Does not matter. And then our redirect URI, I already have it right here. So just to avoid any mistyping or anything of the sort, I'm going to take it starting from the equals all the way to the response type of this and I'm going to paste that there. And then I'm going to take my client ID, which again is back here. And I'm just gonna paste that in. Oops, right here. Okay, so I've created this, or the scope is the same. This is actually what it says to do. Read only, perfect, not a problem. Access type offline, included grant scopes, yes. State, whatever I give it. Redirect URI, for sure. And then lastly, the type that we're getting, code and client ID. So we'll go back here really quickly. Let me see here. So where it says state, it says it's recommended. And like I had said, it's just making sure that that thumbprint is the right thumbprint. But I just want to quickly go back here and make sure that I did everything right. So we have the client ID, we've added the redirect URI, response type, set to code, it is set to code, scope, the scope that we added down here, access type, offline, cool. And it's also important to note that for the offline, especially if you include offline and access type, you are going to get a refresh token. If you do not have it set to offline, or if your service doesn't have an option like that, you'll find with Shopify, you have to include something similar. You won't get a refresh token. And the reason being is because offline is intended for web apps or web services that are basically performing data-driven operations when the user is not logged in. So if it's happening at a certain time or something of the sort where a user wouldn't be logged in, you would want it to be set to offline, because then you'll be given a refresh token, which you can then exchange for an access token. And I know it's all a little confusing at first, but as we go through, I'll show you everything.
Is that what that big long thread was that you sent me way back months ago was all about? Was that refresh token? You sent me a very helpful forum post. All about, yeah, because I went through that. I suffered a great deal when I was trying to do OAuth. It wasn't with Google, but it was basically my token was expiring like every 5 seconds, and I was like, I didn't have the flows to refresh everything, and so I couldn't get it to work.
Oh goodness, yeah, no, I know the pain.
I know you know the
pain. Yeah, that was a really helpful thread. I don't have it anymore, unfortunately. I actually removed it.
I have it. I can send it to you.
Oh, that would be the best thread for anybody getting started.
Okay,
it's amazing.
I'll post the link in the chat, and then Kim, you can post it in the comments, please.
Awesome. Yeah, that thread saved my life. It really did. I took that project, the YouTube API project. A bunch of content creators came to me. They said, hey, you've done some other work for us. Would you like to do this work? And I was like, of course. They said they wanted an app where they could have users come onto their application, and it would be a challenge of sorts. They want every week you to upload a new video with a certain hashtag, which is pretty simple, and it's a pretty cool challenge idea. It's just the execution was poor, I guess, where they only had a month to do it for some reason. And they said, hey, will you do it? And of course, I would love to help you guys out for sure. Did I know how to do it? Absolutely not. I've never used a bubble before. I was like, I'm going to figure it out though. So for a month straight, I sat down there, banged my head against the table for hours on end. And eventually I found that thread, and it saved my life. Super cool. So yes, if you could share that, everybody could benefit from it.
Yep, coming into the chat for you now, Kim.
Amazing. Okay, so what we've just done here with this data is I just paired it. I've just made sure like this is the way that it should be set up. With my luck, this won't work, but what we're going to do, we are going to have a button. And for YouTube in particular, I'm not following the actual design rules that Google sets up. When you authenticate with Google, you're supposed to have a Google button. For this demonstration purpose, I just have a button. But when you click it, it's asking us to go to this URL. And so this is something changed here, redirect. Oh, it's my state. Okay, so when I click it, it's going to send us here. And then it's going to send us to our redirect page, which I have here. So you will need to create a redirect page for your application. Super important. If you don't have a redirect page, then you won't be able to actually capture that data that's returned to us in the URL from the server. So I say when this, and especially if you have multiple APIs and you have one redirect page, you want to make sure that you're storing the right information and you're sending the user to the right place. And so for that, what I've done is when the page is loaded and the URL contains Google, it is going to do this. It's going to get our YouTube data. I'm going to disable this. because we don't want it to run actually. And I'll show you why we don't want it to run. So we've updated that Google authentication. And actually, I need to do this real quick. Wait, I don't want to go here. No, I just want a link to it. Give me a link. Okay, cool. So here is on Google, you're going to have a place. It's called myaccount.google.com/permissions that shows you all of the applications that have access to your account. So for me, I'm signed in with my test user that I had assigned on the console. And I'm going to see all of my applications. So I've done Cloud Convert, Creator Now, so on and so forth. And if you go here, you'll see something similar. I don't know, I can't give you a super accurate answer, but this is called fun test for the record because it's a fun test. I can't give you an accurate answer as to why, but if you have any kind of error that presents itself on site or inside your application, and you've already authorized within Google and it's authorized within your profile, you will run into nothing but headaches if you try to reinitialize or re-authenticate. I don't know why. Google hasn't, I've asked forums and I've never gotten an actual response. So I do apologize for not being able to provide that information, but for your benefit, if you're dealing with Google APIs, always have this tab open, just in case you need to restart somewhere.
See, what I love about your breakdown is it's a real breakdown. Like you're not just saying, here, go do this and go do that. You're actually like explaining like your understanding of how these things are working, which is something that I haven't found in other tutorials. So thank you so much.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just speaking my brain, the way it comes in, the way it comes out, I totally
I'm here
get it.
For it.
Yeah, sweet.
Front row with popcorn.
Awesome. Sweet. So we've disabled the redirect URI. We're going to go back to our page here. Again, when we click the button, we're clicking this information. We're going to this URL. So we want to have it set up to where we are, going to an external website. So I'm going to go back here real quick. Google Auth, just make sure it's the right one. Open an external website. Cool. We're going to do this. Some magic's going to happen where it asks us to enter our information or sign up with the right information. And we're going to do just that. As I was saying, this application isn't verified. We have not gone through the process for Google to actually recognize it as real, which is the reason why we only have 100 test users available. As you're doing this, especially for the first time, you will need to click continue, proceed to the scary site, ensure you're enabling that you have your YouTube account authorized here for this, and then click continue. When we click continue, it's doing some calculations on the back end, and then in our URL, we have everything that I had said. So we have the code here, because that was the type that we were getting back was code. And this information goes for a while. So it goes up to here. That's the code that we want to reference. And then it shows us, this is the scope, and this is the state that we enter. Again, just a thumbprint. And so when we are on this page, the reason I haven't enabled those workflows to redirect us to the right pages is because I wanted to show you in the URL, this is the data that you are going to need to reference. The code specifically is going to be what gets us the access token, and then subsequently the refresh token. So it's a pretty straightforward process so far. What we've done is we've created our application in the console. We've created that API key. We've then created the URL we're going to send our user to, referencing this document, referencing also what we need to include. So all of this stuff. And then we're given the code. So the next part of this is going to be handling the server response. And this is what's going to happen if you have been denied. And this is going to be this is what's going to show if you've been authorized successfully. And this is exactly what we're seeing. We're seeing our own code. And so what we are going to do now, we are going to exchange the authorization code for our tokens. And so when we get our tokens, this is now how we are going to be using the service's data. So we're just passing information back and forth to get this information. So I know it's a little confusing, but on the other page that was green, I forget, there was a green bar. It showed a bunch of diagrams for how the server communicates with the client and so on and so forth. And that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing here. And so this is when we actually start using the API connector, which is also a little scary, but the job here today is to make it less scary for us all. What we're going to be looking at here is this. This is super important. It's the endpoint. And as you'll find out with any other service and so on and so forth with their documentations, for the most part, they're very, very clear what their endpoint is. That is, of course, anything but Reddit in my experience so far.
Okay.
Yep. So this is the endpoint we're going to be using. This is the information. These are the parameters that we are going to be passing. So we have our client ID. We have our client secret. They are both right here. We have our code, which is right here. We have our grant type, which needs to be set to authorization code. And we have our redirect URI, which is set down here. So to get started, we're going to go to plugins and we're going to go to YouTube. We're going to create one here. We'd say YouTube, but then we're going to create a new call. And I have named it token. I feel like that was a good fit. I was like, what we should name this? Probably that. Token.
Yeah, I dig it.
So to get started here, you'll notice that we do have the option of post, get, put, patch, delete. Posting is going to be what we're going to be doing here. And the reason I know that is because in the example, it says post. So to make it as easy as possible, referencing their documentation, super, super important. You also see where it says content type application XWW form URL encoded. Most people would look at that and say, I have no idea what that means. That is alien to me. And that's absolutely. Me. Yeah, well, it is alien. I absolutely understand. What we're doing is we're letting the server know what information we want or what information that we're basically wanting to grab. And here it's saying that basically, yes, this information is going to be, form URL encoded, which is a fancy way of saying that it's going to be, specifically this way. And I can't elaborate on that because I don't have too much knowledge on other contrasting examples. But for this, all you need to know is this is what you're going to be typing in. So here
sounds
we are.
Like key value pairs. So
I believe that's exactly what it is.
Okay.
So we have the header. So first and foremost, we create the post, and then our host is here, which name token post, and then the URL that we're referencing. And so this is actually showing an example from something slightly different. Obviously, we're using Bubble. So we would just call this right up here. So we would take that and we would just paste it right there. Headers are pretty important. You'll definitely see how in the future the headers are especially important, but this is letting the server know basically this is the data that we want. So we would just go here into content type. We would then put content type application XWW form URL encoded, which is exactly what we've done. And if we remove this, which I'm sure I'll be able to show you in just a second, we'll notice that it won't work. But this is the best way of setting up the API connector, where you're going to initially click that button, and then in the URL, you're going to be given this information. Mm-hmm. If you do it any other way, the code only works once. So you need to make sure that you don't have it refresh or run through any calls. You basically want to do it in a step-by-step process, which is why it can very easily break, because if you do the wrong thing, then you have to restart and so on and so forth. But what you do is you'd reference this documentation here, client ID, client secret, so on and so forth, and you would set it up as the keys. And so that's what we've done. We've set up code, client ID, client secret, redirect, and grant type. And
where are you getting those values for the for those fields?
Sure, yeah. So I'm getting these, the code in particular is from this URL up here. So we'll go ahead and copy this and we'll go ahead and paste it here. We'll get the client ID and we'll get the back up here on your console, your Google console. We'll go ahead and paste it in here. And the client secret. Just go ahead and paste it in here. The redirect URI is also within your console here, where we copy and paste that, and then bang. And then the authorization code, the reason we're entering that is because it tells us to do so. We need to set it to authorization code.
Okay.
And so what
And
we'll do
then
now, oh yeah.
what's the difference between the parameters that you have marked as private versus not?
Great question. Yes, so what I've marked as private is information that we don't need to actually see when we are building this application out using Bubbles visual creative thing, whatever you call it. But what I have marked as non-private is information that's going to be passed through that visual creation workspace on Bubble. And we're going to be able to then see this data. We're going to be able to pass in new data instead of it not showing up at all. So if it's private, it doesn't show up. If it's not private, it does show up.
Yep. And I would say if it's private, it doesn't have to change. So like as you're running calls, it's going to be the same. So you don't need to dynamically change it in your workflows.
Exactly. Yep. And last but not least, before we run this, it's important to use, so you can do it different ways. You don't have to do it as data. You don't have to do it as action, but I like to use it as action because this data is going to show up on the back end. So when we're building out our workflows, we'll be able to say, select data from API and then pull the token. Or if we continue on, channel info, video info, so on and so forth. I'll show you that for sure. So you can have it data where on the front end, when you're building out your repeating group and so on, you can have it say pull from this data, or if it's an action, you can have it on your workflow on the back end. And that's the only way you'll actually be able to have it on your back end is if you select action. So that's why I have it as action, because all of this is going to be done on the back end.
Okay.
So fingers crossed, we're going to go ahead and reinitialize this call here. So we've entered all that information the way that it should be, and we're given an access token, we're given a refresh token, and we're given an expires in. So this is in seconds, I believe, if I recall correctly, it's in seconds. So we have 3,599 seconds. Now, you want to click save when you are running through this. You don't want to click cancel or anything. You want to click save. And what's going to end up happening here, if you need to reference this in the future, you do want to write this down on a notepad. That's what I will say. So open up your notepad editor and then copy that information in there just for ease of use. But if you don't, you're always able to click the manually enter API response, and then this pops up. Basically what you just received. So if you need to reference that in the future, you'll be able to. Then moving forward, so we've successfully now captured an access token and a refresh token. So at this point, you and I, we could create a call where we get the data from the YouTuber. We could look at their videos, we could look at the channels, and we pass in this access token. But before we do that, it's important that we actually initialize a refresh token. And the reason we're going to do this is because, well, it expires. And, you know, we don't want it to expire. So let me see here. We're going to just Control F and then refresh, and it's somewhere on this page. It is near the bottom. So exchanging the authorization code for refresh and access token. We just did that. Got to keep on scrolling down. So offline access. And this is what I was referencing earlier, where we did select offline access because we plan on maybe running data in the backend when the user is not available. I would always recommend, at least in my experience, running offline access instead of, you know, online only. It can run into issues, like I said, especially if you're doing things on the backend when the user isn't logged in.
Smart.
So for instance, with that YouTube challenge that I created, it was important that we were gathering metrics every hour or every however so long. And of course, the user is not going to log in 24/7. So we set it to offline access. And that's how we access those metrics and that data. So to do so, to refresh an access token, we are going to call this endpoint. Fortunately, again, Google puts it right front and center for us. So this is the data that we are going to be using, or the endpoint that we're going to be using for our refresh token. So it said to do it as a post and to use this URL. So post and then that URL, and then post that URL. Cool. So again, I'm referencing this data to see what the content type is. It is the exact same as it was up here. So that's what I did. It's the exact same. And then we'll look at the documentation again. And then you can see we have the client ID. Yes, we have that. Client secret. Yes, we have that. grant type, it needs to be set to refresh token. Okay, not a problem. And then refresh token. Well, we have that. We just got that from the last call we made. So we reference that again by going here, and we see that our refresh token is 1 / / blah, 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 blah. Cool. So we'll copy and paste this. Make sure that that's saved, not a problem. And so we will, ensuring that it's not private, go ahead and paste that in there. And similarly to the one above, this is running on the backend, so it's set to action. I've set up all of the things the way that needs to be set up, fingers crossed that it works, and it does. So now we're given an access token. And so what's important here is that, yes, this will still expire. This access token does expire. But let's say we have an access token and it expires, and then we're trying to run some backend data workflow. What we'd want to do is before it even begins, that workflow begins, we'd want to refresh the token. And this just ensures that we're given a new access token so that when we add this access token to the call that we're going to be running, it's not an expired, it's a brand new one. And so the services that you're going to experience in the future, whether that's Shopify, any ticketing platforms, or whatever services you're going to be running with, they have a different, not different, they all have a unique way of handling these, I guess, access / refresh tokens. So what we're doing here, we're communicating with the servers ourselves. So it is going to be important using the server-side flow to make sure that we're handling, of course, the access token. Whereas with Hubstaff in particular, the time tracking tool that I had created, it gives us an access token, and then it gives us a refresh token every single time. And the reason why it does that is because, well, we can have it cyclically update. So we have a recurring workflow where it basically never runs out. Unlike Google, where it will run out, and the only way that you can have it work again is if you create or use a call, rather. And I'll show you what I mean, because that could be a little confusing, I think. I'll show you what I mean in
Agreed.
the future. Yeah, it's pretty interesting, but it's just really the way that the authorization flow is set up. And like I said, we're using a server-side authorization flow, so we are the ones that are responsible for this data. But without getting into all of the technicalities and things where I might not even be making sense, we're going to continue on into the channel info and actually setting up the calls, which is by far the most important part. We've gotten over the crazy dumb stuff, in my personal experience. We've gotten over the dumb stuff here where we're just making sure that this user is authenticated. In my experience, like I said, I think this is where if anything's to go wrong, it's going to go wrong in this process here.
Okay.
Fortunately, it's like we've experienced together here. It's pretty simple, especially if the documentation is well written. Google has, again, just great documentation. So pretty simple. But yeah, so now what we've done from this call here is we've just successfully gotten a new access token. And so all this information, I would always urge you to write it down. So we have the access token expires in the scope, just confirming that, yes, this is the scope we're using, and then the token type as bearer.
And we're writing it down for when?
What we're going to be using it in the calls that we're about to be initializing.
Got
it. Keep in mind, this entire time, I have not reinitialized my redirect flow. So my redirect code is still here, so on and so forth. So we're about to experience what to do when we actually have it good to go. We're going to enable those redirect workflows, and I'll show you in just a second. But before you do that, what you're going to want to do is then set up the calls that you are going to want to use. So for instance, I'm actually going to focus on, well, sure, let's just focus on both. So you're like, okay, well, how do I get this data? How do I actually use the YouTube API? Where do I go to find this information out? So what we're going to do is most of these services are going to offer their development or developer docs. In this case, we can go to reference for Google or for YouTube. And when we're on the reference, we're going to see a bunch of things on the left-hand side. So this is what data we can pull. So we're going to look at channels in particular, because channels is, it's sort of the bread and butter of YouTube. You need to have a channel to post videos and to like, comment, subscribe, so on and so forth. And so when we click overview, it gives us exactly that. It gives us an overview of the channels. It shows us what the resources are going to look like using the JSON structure. It's going to show us the properties, and it's going to show us all of the fun stuff that we're going to be able to reference, basically, which is in itself pretty confusing because we're just scrolling down like, this is a giant list. What? I don't even know what I'm looking at. Yeah. So instead, we're going to actually click on the list here. And the list for Google or YouTube in particular is going to pull open the the API playground. So we'll actually be able to use what we're seeing down here, and we're going to be able to plug it in here to then inside this website, see if it actually works, which is pretty cool. It's like using the API connector, or it's like using Postman if you're familiar with that, which is just another fancy API connector, basically. So here at the very beginning, we can see that we're given an HTTP request where we're given the URL where we can actually now pull data from. It says get, and then it gives us the v3/channels. And so this is, well, our endpoint. This is what we're going to be referencing. So what we do is just like up here where we created a token and a refresh, we would create a new call and we'd call it whatever we want to. And in this case, channel info is probably the most appropriate. Again, I set it as an action because I want to use this all in the back end. I don't really want anybody to use this in the front end. And if I did, I would set it as data, of course. But now we're going to start getting into the parts where you're like, okay, this obviously looks a little different. Now for the headers, this information that we're passing to the server, it looks like it's different than the content type, which is definitely the case. What we're now doing is we're saying that we're going to accept application/JSON, and its authorization is the bearer, which we had seen up here. So the token type is bearer. And then, well, the access token we just got. So we're going to take this access token, the one that we just got from the refresh. And the reason we're using the refresh is because after we called the initial token, we then actually did refresh it with this refresh, which means that the token that was given to us through this refresh call, being the most recent call we've made, is the most the active access token. This is the access token. So inside these headers, we're then going to, well, do exactly that, post bearer, then the access token. And what I want to do here, I want to scroll down if I can, because let's see. Okay. You're probably wondering how I knew to accept application/JSON or authorization/bearer. And in partially, it's because, of course, I've worked with this before, and I know that when we're dealing with APIs, we want to have an authorization bearer and then the access token. This is what lets that call know, or that server know in particular, yes, this is valid. This is the user that we're going to be dealing with, and that the data here is going to be returned as JSON. Now, that's pretty confusing. But there is somewhere on this page where I had seen that says that's what we want to do. And I'm trying to find it. And unfortunately, we will find it in the future. I can guarantee you that. But rest assured, at this very moment, all you need to know is that if we're dealing with this channel information, that we're going to want to have the headers set to accept an authorization. We're accepting application/JSON, and then the authorization is set to bearer, and then with our access token.
That's pretty common. I mean, it's pretty common for you to see your API keys require bearer and then a space and then the key following it. Even if you don't understand where it comes from, that's a pretty common thing.
Yeah, definitely. Through all of the services that I've done API connectors with, yeah, it's all the same, which is one of the reasons why, I guess, this is how it's done. But keep in mind, this is not set to private. So this is information that is going to update, and that is information we're going to need to change. And then you have the opportunity always to select whether or not these are going to be private. But let's go through and break them down real quick. So what exactly are we doing with our part? What is a part? Well, to YouTube, a part is going to be information. It's going to be a string. It's going to be the parameter that we're going to be pulling in. So for us, in this instance, we're going to be pulling in the content details of the videos and the snippets of the videos. So what is a content detail and what is a snippet? To Google, the content detail is going to basically be the title, the description, and so on. Or rather, that's the snippet. The snippet's going to be the content title, so on and so forth. The content details are going to be views, things along those lines. And I might be just a little bit off in that, but the best part about the APIs is that you get to experiment with them, especially if it's as streamlined as Google's. You could just type in content details, run the call, see what it pops up, run in snippet, see what it pops up. So for instance, let's do that. Let's do snippet here. We're going to use the Google or the Google playground. So the required parameter is the part. So we always need a part here for Google's YouTube. And then specify exactly one of the following. Okay. We're going to run mine. So mine, the parameter can only be used in an authorized request. Okay, cool. Mine equals true, because that's, well, true. And we're going to execute it. I'm going to make sure that I select my little dude here. I'm going to allow it. And then, oh, look at that. It worked. So it worked. And in the event that I am then going to want to pull this data in, I know that I can do part snippet, mine equals true. And in fact, if we go back here, part, I have content details snippet and statistics, mine equals true. And so for reference, I'm actually going to show you if we include snippet, content details, and statistics, what is going to pop up. So for just the snippet, what we're seeing is the title, the description, and that's about it. Okay. And what's interesting here is also that when we read over what the channel gives us, it's going to, what the use cases are for. It's going to list the channel ID, it's going to give us the username, and it's going to show us some other information about that. So YouTube API is pretty cool, but it's also a little, I've said that Google has a streamlined documentation process, but with YouTube in particular, it's a little convoluted. It takes some time to go through and ensure that you're calling the right thing to find the right information. But what we're going to be doing with this in particular, when we do part, snippet, content details, and statistics, and also ensuring that mine equals true, we're going to be able to find the ID of this channel, which is important in the future when we want to pull, well, playlists or videos from this ID. So let's go ahead and execute it. And so now we're actually able to see content details related playlists. We have our uploads playlist. We have our statistics, which shows us all of this fun stuff. So this is something that we didn't just have, but now we do. And so this information is very cool. We're going to go ahead and reinitialize this call. I've already set the authorization token to be the most recent authorization token. And this is what happens. We're given all of this data. And it's exactly the data that we just saw in the playground. So we know that it works, which is awesome. In particular, one thing that I referenced or used, especially in the creation of the apps, was the uploads playlist, because this is how you're actually able to see the videos of the user that they most recently uploaded.
Okay.
And so the reason I say that is because when we're pulling video info in the next call from a playlist, we're actually going to be passing in that playlist ID.
Got it.
And so keep in mind, again, that these are not set to private, which means that we have 100% the ability to manipulate this data and to ensure that we can get what we want from it. Playlist items is another, it's unlike channels, but it's similar because it's, of course, in the YouTube API. So we're going to go to playlist items here, and we'll be able to go to list, and we'll be able to see where we need to make our call. And so I really quickly want to show you Zendesk API. And the reason why is because when we look at their API, you're going to see, and this is, I just want to take a quick little detour here. I just want to show you how in-depth their documentations are.
Okay.
So we have like all of the things that we could possibly ever do, and it gives us, you know, the parameters and key values and so on and so forth. It gives us examples, but then it also very everywhere you're going to see git / blah, 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 and it shows you what you can use it for. And so I just wanted to take a quick detour and show you that other platforms have even more robust documentation for their developers, where Zendesk has probably the most robust that I've ever experienced so far. So I just wanted to show you this very
favorite,
quickly.
And I say that with with a hint of sarcasm, is Stripe's API.
Oh no, Stripe's API. I just see every other week Bubble released a new update fixing this issue and this issue. I'm like, oh, this sounds like
with
a
Stripe?
fun time.
Oh,
Yeah. Oh, so many things. Yes. But I just wanted to take a quick little detour and show you that other platforms are going to have even more robust in a similar nature, of course. So if you're ever wondering if I'm going to be working with a service, is it going to work with me? Is it going to work for me? You can go there and you can, just like in Google, go through everything and see how it works. And the reason, again, is just because it by far is more robust. But anyway, we're going to go here to, now we're pulling the data from this channel. We've captured the playlist ID from that channel. And now what we're going to do is we're going to pull videos from that playlist ID. And it's going to be the exact same way that we set it up back here, which makes it pretty simple. We're just going to capture, or copy rather, that URL. So right here, we're ensuring that it's a get function. So we're going to make sure that it's get playlist items, so on and so forth. Again, it's going to accept blah, 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 application JSON, authorization, and we do need to update this access token. So we're going to take the most recent access token, and we're just going to paste it. And then, of course, as always, with Google, at the very least, it's very cool. They do give us this part, or the playground again. So we can just ensure that we're doing snippet content details and we're taking this playlist ID.
So Cameron, just correct me if I'm wrong, but just for those who are watching, what we're doing is sequentially initializing our API calls in the API connector. And this is the pre-work that you do before you can actually use those calls in your application.
100%. That's correct. Yep. This all of the data that we're creating, or all of the API processes that you're seeing right now, are essential, are necessary before we can actually start using them inside our application.
And you have to do them sequentially because you're actually making some calls to Google and YouTube's API in order to make sure that the connection is proper. And here's the key part for people who have never worked with the API connector before. If you try to use the calls before they're initialized, you won't be able to find them in your actions and your workflows. So.
Yep, 100%. That is exactly it. Yep. We're making real live valid calls to the server. We've exchanged the authorization token. We have the refresh token. So this is real data that we're actually dealing with now. And we just need to make sure.
I just took and I copied your API connector, like all of your calls for connecting to YouTube, and I just pasted it, which you can do, by the way, which is super helpful. It still wouldn't work because I wouldn't I wouldn't have initialized those calls properly.
Exactly.
So I'd still have to go through this process to sequentially go through and make the initial call to get the first access token, and then run the refresh to get a new token, and then make sure that I'm using the latest token to initialize the next one and the next one.
Exactly. So. Yep. And it all starts with that initial click to the redirect to their server, which then redirects you back to your page. It all starts with that. And yep, you have to do it sequentially. Otherwise, for instance, actually, so what we'll do is I'll redo. So I just undid the authorization token and I'll reinitialize the call. So for instance, this is the wrong access token. I'm going to reinitialize the call and it's going to come up with an error. It's going to say, hey, this is not the right access
token. How many times have we banged our heads against our keyboards because of that exact thing?
So many times, absolutely. And it's always a bummer too when, let's say you've created the calls and then you realize that it's been done with a data instead of an action. And so then you're like, okay, well, I'll just quickly switch this back to an action. I'll reinitialize the call. You can't, because your access token has already been used, which means you need to basically restart the process over, which is why I have not enabled the flows here, why this is still showing the redirect code and I haven't changed anything. In the event I make a mistake, I'll have to go back here to when we initially click that button, and I'll have to restart it all again to get that access token to then get, well, where is it? Yeah, here it is, to get that access token to then, or to get the code rather, to get the access token, so on and so forth. So yeah, it's super fun when you make a mistake. That's why we don't want to actually do that yet. We don't want to have those workflows enabled. Not yet. And we'll get there though. I'll show you exactly how to do that. And then everything will make sense. Everything will be connected and we'll be happy. Yeah. But so I've redone the authorization token. I made sure that's the most recent one. In fact, I don't trust myself. So let's go back to the access token we received from the refresh call. And then let's just paste it in here. Okay, cool. And similarly, the playlist items is going to have a part that you're going to need to include. So snippet and content details is what I'm including for this. It's going to give us the title and the description, and then the playlist ID. The playlist ID is, in this case, this one is their uploads. As we had experienced when we called the channel originally, we have where it says related playlist uploads. And this is, well, the uploads in this case, the most recent uploads of this user. There are ways to get different playlist IDs, but we're not going over that today. We're just going over their most recent uploads. And so with that said, again, playlist ID isn't private, but now we have the new access token. And keep in mind, the entire time we're just referencing this page. We're saying, okay, so we need one required parameter, which is the part, and we need one of the following parameters. And in this case, we're selecting the playlist ID. And so we're going to head initialize the call, and it comes through successfully, which is always awesome. I'm always scared when I click that button. I'm like, oh God, is it going to work?
It's trauma. It's like, it's really, it's traumatic when you've done it. So like maybe the first time you see that you're like, oh, maybe I did something wrong. But like the 50th time that you see it in a row, it's you have gone through something. So.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah. I'm like, oh no, I got to take a break. Got to walk away for
Step
however
away
long.
from the computer. Yeah.
Which is also something I can say is super important.
Yes,
if you have the brain that I have, which is like a very ADHD, hyper-focused kind of brain, you could spend 7 hours dealing with the exact same error code, which is not good. It's not healthy. Walk away. It's going to help out immensely. So take it from me. I'm sure Tonya as well. Sometimes it really is just beneficial just to say,
well, come on office hours at least, so you don't suffer alone, because that's the thing.
Yeah. Like, Exactly. You don't want to suffer alone. Cool. So what we have done so far, just to recap, is we've gone through the access token, we've gone through the refresh token, and then we've initialized 2 calls where we pulled data from the Google services. And keep in mind, this all started with creating an OAuth screen and credentials for this application, where we enter in all of the necessary information. Where is our app? Where are we going to be sending users? So on and so forth. So we have now successfully, which I can say very happily, created the flow. We now have all of the data that we need, which is super awesome. So now we're going to go ahead and actually go to that redirect page, where we're then going to, create what's going to happen when we're redirected here. Mm-hmm. And so, as you've noticed, if you're, like I said at the beginning, if we're using multiple different APIs, Reddit, Google, and say Shopify or whatever, all in the same app, we want to say when this page is loaded and add a condition when this URL contains Google. And very quickly, I'll actually, we'll refresh this page and I'll show you where it contains Google. And then it's gonna, oh, that's right. I already enabled it. Oops. We're going to go back here. I am going to, as I had said, remove this because we've already initialized it. We want to remove it. Otherwise, it gets really weird. And then we're going to do this.
And you said that was kind of like a Google specific thing, or have you found that to be the case in other ones? Because I'm wondering if maybe that was causing some issues I was experiencing in another API.
To my knowledge, I know that, so with Hubstaff, for instance, sometimes I have ran into issues where it didn't work on a second time. I'm not sure why, but if I then refresh the private token I was given, it works. So something to deal with access already being granted. I do know that it is finicky, which is why then we're given a refresh token. So we can just refresh that access token. But we're not doing that in this instance. We're not trying to refresh any access token. We're trying to start from scratch. So if you're starting from scratch where something's already existing, it doesn't really work out that way, which is weird. I wish I knew, but okay. So in the URL, I say if it contains Google, which it does right here, then it's going to take certain data and it's going to do certain data the way that we want it to. What I have done, and you can do this many different ways. I have created inside my database, I've created something called API keys, where then inside API keys, I have the Google code, the Google access token, expiration, and then also for any other tools. So for Reddit, I have the access token, refresh token, and all of the other information that might be pertinent. With that though, let's go back here. So I have created that, and I've said, I want you to change the first API key item, which for me, in my case, there should only be really one table here. You shouldn't really have any other rows or anything. Because we're really just focusing on that one record. All we really need is one record. And you can also have this to where it's actually unique to each user. So you could do things to change user, and then under user, you could have their access token and refresh and so on and so forth. But because this is just an example across the board test, I have created this for the application instead of the user.
Okay.
But what we're doing is we're getting the code from the page URL. We're getting that Google code, which is the coolest thing I think that Bubble has, where we can actually take data from the URL. It parses that data for us. And so let's go back here where we are able to see the code. Code equals this. And Bubble, it intelligently knows the URL when it reaches an and sign that it's done with this string. So it reads from the equals to the and it's going to take that code for us. And then it stores it in the Google code. So for instance, if I was to go to the Google code right here, you'll see it follows the exact same structure, / blah, blah, blah. And up here, / blah, blah, blah. So we do know that fortunately it works, which is awesome. What we're then going to do is we are going to use that API call that we had created in our API connector called token. So what we would do is we go to plugins, and then we would scroll the way down. It's alphabetical. So U2 token. It's asking for that code that we passed in. So,
and that's the piece that I was talking about before. If you haven't properly initialized your call, you won't find it in that list that Cameron just grabbed that from, because it won't have been initialized properly.
That's correct. And then also, because it's not private, we're able to actually modify it.
That's the other thing. Exactly. So those check marks that say private versus not, if you had checked private, you won't see that. Just show them, check it as private, and then go back to it and show them that it's no longer available to change.
Oh yeah, sure. So let's do that. What I'll need to do is I'll need to get my most recent code. Make sure I've highlighted it up until the and. And so we'll reinitialize this call. Cool, it works, awesome. But it's not private. And so we go back to our workflow and it's gone.
Yep, so if you uncheck it and reinitialize, then that becomes available. And that's what those check marks are for. And I didn't know that for when I first started. It took me a bit to figure that out. Probably I wasn't patient enough to go through all of the tutorials.
It does happen. I completely understand. I feel like when it comes to patience, especially with Bubble, especially with APIs, it is going to be important that you're reading all the things that you need to be, because it's very easy. Just get lost in it and be like, okay, now I don't know where to go and don't know how to do things. But real quick, I need to reauthorize that token because I just used it. So make sure I removed it. It is removed. Make sure this is here private. Okay. And so, yeah, every single time you make any kind of change to your API, you have to reinitialize it. The reason we have to do this again is because that access token only is valid for one call. And since we just showed you guys that you could get the access token, or you could get the code, rather, the access token from the code, we've used the code. So we need to refresh it. And that's all I'm doing here. Cool. That's awesome. It always works. We like it when it works.
Yeah, working is good.
Yeah. So you'll see that I get the code from step 1. So I say the code that I'm passing in is going to be from step 1, which is when we got the code from the URL. And now we're going to pass it in, and it's then going to give us the access token, the refresh token, and the expiration. So what we do very simply is it's a result of step 2. And here, I'll even erase it here. So result of step 2, and it gives us these, what to select. And well, obviously we want the access token. And for refresh, we want the refresh. And for expiration, we want the expiration. And the reason why we are capturing the expiration in particular is because we want to be able to calculate using some workflows when to run that refresh token. And this is more specifically towards other services where you have, like I was explaining with Hubstaff, where you have a cyclical cycle going on, where you're able to actually exchange the refresh token for the access token at a certain time. And so it's just a force of habit that I've discovered that it can be useful, especially to include the expiration time, which is, again, in seconds. So we created this as a number. These are texts, and this is a number. But with that, we now have the information that we want, which is awesome. So we're now able to access the calls that we had created. So channel info. Channel info is going to be the only thing that we're really operating or changing rather on the channel info is that authorization header, where we're dinging the bearer, but we're also taking the most recent access token. So we just search for the API keys. We're searching for the first item, and then we're taking the Google access token. And same as this, except now, as we had experienced with the previous call, or the call that we had set up for the video info, we're able to pass in the upload or the playlist ID. And so all of this is able to be entered dynamically because it hasn't been set to private, which is super awesome. I'm now able to, after this is entered the way that it needs to be entered, I'm able to change. In this case, I have it for the user. I have it where we're changing the YouTube ID, the YouTube uploads ID. So to clarify, this is the channel ID, this is their uploads playlist ID, and then this is their videos that we're going to be pulling from the uploads ID.
Okay.
And so you'll see here that the channel 4, or step 4 rather, for the channel info, for these two, it's specifically referencing step 4. And for then step 5, it is referencing the video info. So we're actually taking this data, and then we're passing it in through here, and then we're storing it in the last step. The cool thing about Bubble, or just programming in general, is there's a lot of ways to do the same thing. So you could maybe even find a more efficient route. But for simplicity and ease sake, this is the way that I've created it. It is not always the best way to do it, nor is it the worst way to do it. It's just a way to do it. And so that's what we're seeing here.
Yep.
I did also have it scheduling to do a refresh for that token. So in the event that it expires, I want it to, and what I was referencing earlier is we can actually have it set in a scheduled workflow where we take the current date time, and then we're saying we're going to add it in seconds. What are we adding in seconds? Well, the token's expiration time. And so then I add minutes and I subtract 20, or I'm not adding minutes, I'm just subtracting 20 minutes with this number here. And this just ensures that there's no, any lapse of time where it happens before it needs to, so we don't run into any kind of issue down the line.
Right.
And this is a good.
So I think, 3,599 seconds is 1 second short of an hour, right? And so you just want to make sure that you're running your refresh before that hour is up, no matter what. Because if you let it expire, then you have to have them go through the whole process again, right?
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Yep. And so very last step is just to send them to the API Google page, or whichever page you want them to be sent to. And so what I'm going to do here, I'm going to go back. I'm going to go back. Of course, we're caught in this little loop here. Okay. So for my YouTube API, I have, these are the most videos. This was fun, blah, 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 all this stuff. I've worked, actually, one of my clients is Dr. Moroso in Tucson, Arizona. She is a medical marijuana doctor. Very nice lady. So I have one of her videos on my YouTube page. But what I'm going to want to do for us all here is I'm actually going to want to do something where we actually go to YouTube. And I'm going to show you how quick this works. So I just want to make sure that I'm on the right account. I am. and you can see all my most recent or my recommended videos. I'm just going to upload a random video. I'm going to title it random stuff. I'm going to add a random description. None of this is like, the description isn't necessary, but the title is what I'm pulling in. So I'm going to show us all very quickly how fast this API actually works. This data is instantaneous, basically, which is super cool when we're working with data. It is real time. So it's going to take a couple moments for that to actually work. But we have this now where this workflow is enabled. I need to make sure that I've revoked access because I want to start this from the very beginning. I don't have to. In fact, I have a button here that says get more data, which would have just refreshed my videos I had set up. But I want to show you, so in this workflow, it is getting that channel info. It is getting that video info. It is then updating the current user with those videos, and it's then going to display in this repeating group. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go through the Google OAuth process, and I'm going to show you that the calls are set up correctly. Fingers crossed. So we're going to initialize, go through, continue. It's going to then cycle through, and then the most recent video. It just blah, blah, blah. Cool. So now we know that it works. The YouTube API data works. Everything that we set up for the API connector works, and we are happy. And your client presumably is happy as well.
Yes. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah. It's definitely, I know that we went over this pretty quickly, but at the same time, I hope that it was in depth enough, at least for a beginner, for them to be like, okay, these are the steps that I need to follow to get this working the right way. And if, of course, if you have any questions at any time, let me know. Not a problem.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah,
awesome.
So we did it.
You nailed it. You nailed it. 90 minutes. You said it would take 90 minutes, and it took 90 minutes. Perfect.
Amazing. Now, while I'm still here, though,
yes.
Any questions, comments, concerns, anything that you want to run by me, I'm more than happy to help try and answer.
So I do have one question, but let's open it up and see if anyone else in the audience here. No? My question was going to start at the top of the API connector. A lot of times, so like you start there, you see where it says authentication, none or self-handled.
Yes,
And so why would you do that instead of using OAuth from that authentication menu there?
Yeah, so you could do an OAuth user agent flow. And this is, in fact, if you go through the tutorials for Spotify, I believe, it actually says you should use this one. And yes, you absolutely can. It gives you all of the information that you need to enter, and it makes it a little more smooth. And you can see even with the Google APIs, it has add access type equals offline, which is what we did here, where we said in the redirect URI that it would be offline. Now, each one has a specific purpose and a specific function. And you'll have your login dialog, your access token endpoint, and user profile endpoint. Now, the reason that I have done the none or self-handled is because that means typically, at least in my experience, we have greater control over the way that we're going to be handling these tokens and handling the refresh. Whereas when I used this originally, in fact, there's a thread somewhere on Bubble where Nigel had told me, don't use the OAuth user agent flow for Google, because the way that Google and Bubble sort of interact, it doesn't actually produce the best results. You still can get these results the way that you want them to, because I had initially actually set it up with OAuth 2 user agent flow. It worked for a little bit of time, but we ran into a bug way back when where this didn't work. The access type offline didn't work, so we weren't given a refresh token. And to my understanding, everything for the most part can be done over none or self-handled. And if you're able to do none or self-handled, that means you're probably able to operate with all of the APIs instead of just a select few using the user agent flow.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. That's like the, there's several examples in Bubble where you might choose to do something more manually or have more control over it than they're automated or templated.
Yeah, like this is supposed to be for OAuth 2.0, which is why it says OAuth 2. It's supposed to be for that, to make it more simple. In my experience, it actually is more simple to go through this.
That looks way more simple to me. like the way
Yeah.
you're doing it. It's much simpler.
I would recommend this over everything else. I would recommend this.
Okay.
But while I'm here, I actually want to show you real quick. We'll take a step away from this application and we'll go to the customer service thing I want to show you. Fortunately, I'm pretty sure all the keys are hidden well enough so you won't be able to steal my data. But I want to show you how things are set up here too. Very quickly.
Just so you know, Kim figured out how to blur out sensitive data like later
awesome.
before like during the process of uploading to YouTube so we can protect it.
Okay, amazing. Yeah, that's actually really cool. So for Hub staff, this is what I've been referencing about how we're going to use a recursive workflow or a recurring workflow to sort of exchange that refresh token so it doesn't ever go bad. And so you'll see that I have none are self-handled for this too. I get my access token, which then gives me a refresh token. And then under refresh token, what this is going to do is it's going to give us an access token every single time we run the refresh. And it's going to give us a refresh token every single time we run the refresh. This is different than Google, where it didn't give us a refresh token when we refreshed. It only gave us an access token. What this allows you to do, when it gives you a refresh token, you're able to create a workflow that is going to, and I have a lot of data here, but it's going to give you a token where you're then able to, in this recursive workflow or recurring workflow, run it again and again and again. That's not it. Hub staff refresh, here it is. Where this is going to run at 2:40 a.m. It's going to recycle that refresh token and give you an access token. And so this is important Hub staff refresh. So what I do is I just pass it. So it passes the Hub staff refresh every single so on. I schedule it. We put in the information, the authorization bearer, and then the refresh token, where then it gives us again an access and a refresh token, and then we just refresh this at the the expiration date minus 3 hours, and I of course subtracted those 3 hours just so there wouldn't be any lapse in time, and so it could just run all the time forever. And so I know I went over this pretty quickly, of course, but if you are passing your refresh token through to get an access token and you notice it also gives you a refresh token, you can set up something very similar. So it just basically never goes, or it never expires, I should say. And I know I went over this pretty quickly, so if there's any other questions in the future, let me know. I'd love to help out. But I wanted to show you that because it is slightly different than what we just dealt with Google.
Got it. I have a very fond memory of working on recursive workflows with you for hours at a time.
I love them now. I get them so well, and it makes app development so much more easy.
It does.
It's been a godsend. It really has. Awesome. And then very last thing that I want to show you, because there is a difference, right, between Google and Hub staff with that refresh token. Mm-hmm. With Google, let's say your access token has expired. Before you make any call, you want to use your refresh, where you pass in that refresh token, and then it will give you a new access token. And then you'll be able to make these changes.
Got it. Because for YouTube, the refresh token isn't going to expire. Like you don't have to use a different refresh token every time.
Exactly. Yep. The refresh token is forever. Yep.
Cool. Very cool.
Yeah, so that is hopefully enough information to get you started on your own API projects. I know it can be tricky and it can be scary. Hopefully this made it appear a little bit more simple.
And if it's not, Cameron, what's the best way for people to reach out to you? And are you available for working on projects? Like, are you for hire?
I am at the moment. I absolutely am. I have a lot of time between me and projects. So I can absolutely, let me turn on my Calendly. Oh, I have one actually right now already, which is completely fine. This is a 30-minute meeting. So this is going to be for like consultations, and I don't know how to get to Zoom to add this in. Where do I?
Just the chat. So if you should see it.
Oh, it was the
you might it's.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so this is going to be the best Calendly link at the very moment to reach me at. I am available for consultation. I'm available to help you out with your application. We'll set up an initial meeting just to see, the scope of the project and discover where you're having problems, and so on and so forth. And then I'll be able to provide you a quote, and we'll work towards a solution.
Awesome.
But yeah, so in the meantime, I mean, truly, I have a lot of time to dedicate towards Bubble and Bubble development. I work for a customer service business where I am the one responsible for making applications and basically working on the tech side. So I'm pretty well versed in most things that need to be performed and how they can be performed. So if you have any questions, anything that might even fall outside of the scope of Bubble, reach out to me. I'd love to help you out.
Awesome. Well, Kim's going to post the Calendly link in the comments of the live video for us.
Amazing.
And we'll also do that in the comments of the YouTube video once it goes up. Yeah, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate it. And I loved learning from you. And this is something I've been meaning to do, is to dig into APIs more thoroughly. So kind of helped me. Helped me get a little bit farther along in my goal. So,
well, that's very, very exciting. Now you will honestly be unstoppable, and I'm very excited. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day and everything else.
Yeah, we're gonna stick around here because I think Jay was here, and she said she had some questions, and
I do.
If anybody else does, and you're welcome to stay too, Cameron. Or if you have to take off, we're happy for you to do that as well. It's up to you.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm going to have to take off. I have to go it's a half day at school and I have to go pick up my son. So,
gotcha. Okay.
Awesome. You guys have a great one.
We'll see you later.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.
Hey, Jay, what's up?
I have now that I've put live like actual data in my database, I'm finding, things need to get changed. Gotcha. Well, this is a weird thing. We worked on this just the other week, and it was broken. This is doing something strange. Can you guys see it?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so this is working fine. That's working fine. Now this is interesting. Dun, 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 dun. Eventually, you're going to see some weird behavior, or you may not. There it is. Okay, and there it goes. So I know it's connecting. It's getting the data, but the data's not staying. What is happening?
Whoa. Okay. So we see it for a second and then it disappears.
Yeah.
Let me go find out. I'm going to sign in to your app. Which page am I going to?
Perpetual flowers.
I've been there before.
Yes, more than once.
I know.
Page.
All right. So it's the which repeating group am I going for?
You're going for sorry. I had it all set up, but then I wandered. I think it's called What's Blooming When?
What's Blooming When?
And it's like the third repeating group in there. It's it's group What's Blooming When. And in there, it is colors, but then you won't be able to see that in the element tree because it's long. Where'd it go? Come on. There it is. It's the third one down.
This one?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
All right. And it was working before and now it's not working.
Well, just to display. I mean, it's obviously pulling the data.
Mm-hmm.
So something else has to be happening, right? Unless there's a conflict in the data somewhere that's making it go, oh, here you go. Never mind.
I mean, if it was a privacy rule issue, you wouldn't see it blip on the screen. So I know that's not it. All colors, blooms, options, filtered, and then we do a search for all plants. Or bloom colors contains this. Blooms, options. I remember doing this one with you.
Yes, it was super challenging.
It is greater than 0. Okay. So in the database, what am I searching there? I'm searching for the users. All bloom colors filtered where search for plants. All plants contains this colors. Bloom options, but this is like a subset of searching for something to do with the user, right?
No, it's I mean, it's not, I don't know what you mean by something to do with the user. It is these are the search is for the plants that an individual user owns. So it has that to do with the user, but the actual data type is about the plants.
Okay. Well, but when I'm on the page, like when I go here, and who do I run it as again?
You can run as cat@test.com.
Okay.
That one is low. I know it's in that one.
And then where am I going? Bloom views?
Yes.
By color.
Yes. Should I stop sharing and should you share? Because I can't really see anything.
Yes, definitely. I thought we had already done that.
No, sorry. I was wondering what's going on. I'm like, but I don't know.
I'm
just like overwhelmed with the whole freaking repeating group thing.
You're like, what's going on? Okay, let me click this again.
If you scroll, the horizontal scroll, you may see the weird behavior. Yeah, there it goes. Yeah, it's not consistent.
Well, I mean, that was consistent because that's what I saw when you did it.
Yes. But other times I've scrolled, and as I've come to, as the column that should be populated becomes visible like that, it does it again. There it is.
So we should have values in each thing, because if it's 0, it should say 0.
If it's 0, it should be blank. If the color as a whole, like if there's no orange flowers ever, then that column should be blank. I think that we couldn't get it to not show blank cells, which would be better. But you know what I mean? Like, I'm not looking for perfection. I just wanted to show something.
All right, so in here, this condition, this text is visible. We do this. Search for all plants. Plant owner. Here's
this
the current
is the
user
problem.
part.
This is the problem, because that got deleted. So this should be a search for my plants.
Gotcha.
Okay. How long I looked at it and I just didn't go down that path. And then it should be the color set should be right. And then the month I deleted before I checked that, what that statement said.
Gotcha.
Pains. Current sales months, I suppose. And then plant owner. User. Okay. Okay. Dun, dun, dun. What will happen?
I don't know, but I'm going to find out.
That the bloom month statement might be wrong. Okay. That's right.
That's better.
Oh my gosh. It's better.
It still showed us some weird stuff that
Yeah.
disappeared.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's a blip.
I don't think that'll upset a user. Awesome. Thank you. So where did we go for that? How did we went all the way?
I just went to the text. I went to the text because it was disappearing. And I was like, what condition would have it disappearing?
Yes.
Right. So the conditional was making it disappear and the search was wrong, is what we figured out.
Perfect. Thank you. I have another thing, but I know Brittany's waiting. And my other thing is a lot like the thing we're looking at now. So let me step back and give Brittany a chance and everybody else.
That sounds good. Brittany, you're up.
Okay, I just have one question. Let me get to it.
I'll stop sharing so you can share.
Okay. Okay, so I was just trying to see if I can have a pop-up show up on a page once it is loaded, but only if it comes from a certain page. So only if you're being transferred from a certain page. So from
a page within your app.
Yes. So once they click any one of these select options and then it's transferred over to their settings page, I would like for this, I'm probably going to change what it says, but in general, I just want the pop-up to show, but only if they're being redirected from that other page. Not so say if they come back to this page from their profile or whatever, I don't want that to continue to show up. That's just like them signing up and the pop-up just be there.
So in the workflow, when you click on that select button, you're going to send a URL parameter.
Okay, that's here. So is it this one? Yeah. Okay, in the workflow. Oh, wait. Okay, that's probably gonna change. You said I need to do what now?
So now you're gonna navigate to the other page that you wanna go to.
Okay. What is it? Present settings. Oh.
Okay.
Current user.
And then send more parameters to the page. And then you can make the key say whatever you want, but for your own purposes, it'll probably be easier if you make it something like maybe just pop or something like that. I would do it all lowercase though, personally. That's just a preference probably. And then in there, you don't want it to be dynamic, so you can actually click out of that and delete the dynamic section. Nope. Yeah, you just want to, it doesn't need to be dynamic, so just click outside of that and then you can backspace and erase it, or you can just type outside of it where it says click.
Here? Okay.
Yeah, so you just want to, you can say whatever you want right there, any value that you want. So you can say yes, you can say 1, you can say whatever.
Okay.
And just enter something there. Okay. And then on the page, the setting business owner page. In the workflows, on page load.
So this is from the other one. I need to make another one, right? So this one is from when they're coming back from Stripe.
Okay. Yep. So yeah, you can make another one. So when page is loaded, and then only when get code, or sorry, get from URL, the bottom, get data, and what you're getting is going to be pop. and then just is not empty.
Oh.
Nope. It's so tricky, right?
Yeah.
Is not empty. Yeah, is not empty. And then the action there would be to show that pop-up.
Okay.
And that's what you do.
Okay. Alrighty, I want to try test it out just really quick. How do I? Okay. So I just hit select. Oh, I have it showing pop up. Okay, I'll do the rest of it, but I have to go back in and change that because
yeah,
I wanted...
but
oh, it
as
did.
long as
it worked. Okay.
Yeah, as long as you understand how it's supposed to work, you can apply it everywhere you need to.
Thank you.
You're welcome, for sure. Thomas, did you have anything for today?
Nope.
Nope, you're good? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Jay, back to you.
Dun, dun, dun.
Da, 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 da. I like your sound effects.
That's what happens when you spend a lot of time alone. You don't realize you're making these weird noises like a 3-year-old. So this is, what this is supposed to be. These are just placeholders to make sure the repeating group worked. Mm-hmm. But if you have 3 of this type of zucchini, instead of language here, there should be 3 icons or art pieces of art, 3 assets of zucchinis. And if there's 2 of these, there should be 2. The assets, the graphics come from an option set that has them all in it. And then I've only gotten it to work by hard coding or whatever the icons into the My Plants data type. So I made a field called icon list. And then if you had 3 based on the quantity you'd entered here, you would have 3, and then they would show up in the repeating group. Well, that works great, except the problem is getting them here. I have no way to get those icons here. So what I'd prefer to do is have it be dynamic and have it, if users My Plants has count 3 of these, then show 3 of these options.
I think you're going to need to use, and Jordan Richardson originally showed us how to do this way back when. I think you're going to need to use maybe the toolbox or something, because you're going to need to use like a list of numbers, right? Like, so you're going to have to set, in order to get the repeating group to have 3 entries, and then you can set the entries to show the exact same thing dynamically based on what type it is. So list, Kim, you can call it for the keyword, a repeating group list of numbers, or showing a specific number of things, something like that. So let's just try, I'll try it in the sandbox and see if we can get it working there.
Excellent.
Yeah. So, oh, I don't have it open anymore.
And then the other problem is for Bubble to know which icon. So I tried making it a statement like, if the plant name includes the word tomato, show the tomato icon. And that kind of worked, but the problem is that the data isn't like that. So like there's garlic chives. Are they garlic or are they chives? Well, they're chives, but Bubble has no way of knowing that. You know what I mean? Like there's some logic problems. And the plant's name doesn't always say what kind of plant it actually is. It lends a layer of complexity.
Yeah. Hang on a sec, because you're using option sets. So we're going to do or icon, I guess. All right, can you send me a picture or something?
Sure.
I don't know, can you send files through chat on Zoom?
We're going to find out.
I guess not, you can only send text. It's okay, I can find a picture of a cucumber, it's not a problem. That'll work. And then okay. And then in my data types here, we're gonna have type of veggie, which will be my veggie type OS. And then quantity, which will be a number. Right, my app data thing is going to be veggie, quantity will be 3, type will be cucumber. Be veggie, quantity will be 5, and it's going to be tomato. Got it. And then since I have this in Canvas, I think, yeah, I already have the toolbox. One of the things that the toolbox allows for is a list of numbers here. Now here's the part, I've never actually done this. I've just seen people use it before. Okay. So we'll see if we can.
I watched some tutorials on it and didn't really get it, but what they were trying to do didn't make sense to me. Like, and I mean, it wasn't for my use case.
Yeah, so I don't know how it's going to work, but we're going to try it.
Yeah. Worst case is, you know, it's like the world's going to end if we don't get it right.
Yeah.
It is pictures of vegetables after all.
List of numbers. Start number. 1. Length of list. Be okay, let's go back to how you have your repeating groups set up. So it's multiple repeating groups, right?
Right now, it's just a simple, right now it's a repeating group in a repeating group. So the main repeating group is everything, you know, the vegetables, and then the images are in their own repeating group. You know, I try to
right, exactly. Yeah. Okay, so we've got a horizontal repeating group.
Yeah, the main, yes, exactly.
We're just going to need 2 columns for our purposes here, and this is going to be however many veggies we have.
Yeah.
So it's going to be veggie, and then data sources do a search for veggies in this case. All right, we only have 2. And now we're going to do a repeating group in here, like within, and it's going to be, this is where we need to know, like, is the list of numbers basically. So I'm going to move this into the repeating group here. The start number is going to be 1, and the length of the list is going to be current cells, veggies, quantity. And we'll increment by 1. Right, and then here we want this to be type is, this is the part I don't remember how they set it up. So it's pulling up like the different numbers. So type of content.
Why would it not be image?
Type of content. Well, okay, because it's not, you don't have a list of images, right? So what we're doing, we're just saying we want a certain number of cells.
Yes.
Based on how many is in that quantity field.
Got it. Okay,
right?
That makes sense.
So that's why. And this is the piece of the puzzle that I'm missing. I'm going to put here, but I don't know if it's accurate. So we'll see. And then inside here, we just need the image. And the image is going to be, might have to group this to get to it. So we'll see. This is repeating group. No, so what I have to do here is group this in a group and its current cells veggie. And then hopefully here, I will have group veggies type icon. There we go.
Oh my God. How did you do that? Can we go over how you did that again? Because I did not
of course.
all that.
I will go through it again.
Boom, boom, boom. No problem. So first of all, we started with toolkit.
We started with what?
Toolkit.
Yeah, so you have to make sure that you have this plugin called Toolbox. And Toolbox has an element in it called list of numbers. So on the page, you have to put that element. But I need a list of numbers for each veggie. So it needs to go into the first repeating group, right? So the first repeating group is of the veggies themselves. And then you can constrain it however you want. And then I put this element here, the list of numbers element, inside this repeating group cell. I have the start number at 1. The length of the list is going to be the current cell's veggies quantity. So wherever you're getting that number from. And then I want to increment by 1. And then I had to put the repeating group, the second repeating group, inside of another group that inherited the current cell's veggie, this cell's veggie, because that's what gave me the ability to take this image here and refer to it. But before that, what you're going to set this second repeating group up to be is its type of content is number, and the data source is list of numbers A's list.
And where did that list of numbers A come from?
That's from this.
Oh,
this
okay.
element.
Oh, I see it. Right.
Yep.
Amazing.
And so set that to be a number. The data source will be that list. This list is going to be however many numbers long as the number of veggies, like the quantity of that veggie. And that's going to set up the cells for that number, like however many cells. So in the first one for cucumbers, it's 3, and for tomatoes, it's 5. And then this is going to be dynamic, but it's going to be the same for each one, right? So I'm not referring to the current cells, anything. I'm just saying this. That's why I had to put this repeating group in a group.
And where did you get the option set image from?
So the option set I set up here was veggie type.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then I created a new attribute, which is icon of type image.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just modified the image per.
Right. But where did you connect it to? Where is that? How is a repeating group getting to this?
Oh, so this dynamic thing is I'm taking, so this group that's holding this repeating group. So this is a group that's not a repeating group. It's inheriting the veggie from this current cell from the first repeating group. And then I'm able to refer to that group veggie. Because before I did that, when I had that group, so here, I'll just show you. If I drag this out and I delete this, and then I come back and I take this and put it back in here. When I tried to refer to it, I'm like, how do I get to that veggie? And I don't have access to anything having to do with that particular veggie. Right?
I guess I'm confused because I don't see get an option anywhere in the layers of expressions.
Well, I'm not getting an option. Oh, no, it's not, because you get the option because, oh, sorry, that came from when I created the data. Here, I created 2 veggie entries, and the data type itself, the type is a veggie type. Okay. So I don't have to get an option. The option was already set. I did that when I created the data. So like if I came in here and I had a different like veggie, if I go like 2 tomatoes like that, that's where that get an option happened, was in the creation of this data.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. And then, so I don't have, when I'm trying to dynamically get to this cell's veggie here, I don't have access to it from this image. So that's why I grouped this repeating group in a group and made it of type veggie, current cells veggie, so that then when I come in here, I can grab that vegetable and then I can look at its types icon.
And was the plugin you use, there's Zero Codes toolbox and there's another toolbox.
Plugin I have is
the red one. Okay.
Yep, the red one.
Okay, great. That leaves me with still a challenge, because I have no way yet of associating the my plant record, like, Roma tomato, with the word tomato, so it connects to the option sets display. You know what I mean?
Gotcha.
Right. So that is a problem. I don't know if I can automate that again, because the names are not, they're usually consistent. It usually has the name of the vegetable in the name of the vegetable, but if 5% of them or less are wrong, I'm okay with that. Users will point it out and I'll fix it. But
so show me what you're trying to do again, so maybe I can think through it with you.
Okay. So I'm not sure how to explain this, but wait a minute. Bubble's making us wait and wait. Well, lesson learned so far from this was, if I could go back in time, one thing I would definitely do is get the live data sooner. Mm-hmm. I waited till I thought, we'll just drop it in, it'll be fine. We'll make the data match the data type. It didn't really work out that way.
You know what? I'm watching a thread as we speak in Slack all about data migration headaches. So
you're
not wrong.
Yeah, I had to make some pretty, I mean, they weren't terrible changes. You know, it took a day or two, but ultimately it's good because it makes everything more stable and more flexible. Like I can do more with my data now. So that's exciting, you know, but it's also, you know, like I was expecting to have launched officially by today.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've got all these option sets. This one is here and image type display. So boom. And then
Okay.
it's the type is
Gotcha.
with the vegetable family. I'm not using that for this screen. Okay, this is what I have so far, which is basic and not working. And then the data.
Like, but what are you trying to show them? You're trying, like explain what you're wanting to show them.
So if that user has 3 tomatoes, it doesn't matter what kind, any kind of tomatoes in their patch and their vegetable that they're growing, that they would see 3 icons of tomatoes, you know, 1, 2, 3. And if they also had, you know, 5 zucchini plants, they would see 5 zucchini icons and etc.
Okay.
It's just a visual thing to be pleasing. It doesn't really serve a ton of function. It's just the way your year in color is on perpetual flowers. Yeah.
So what I would do is there's already a data type that you're searching, right? For to get that to get that type, right? And you're needing to search. That data needs to be connected to that option set.
Yes. And so then that leaves me with the problem of, do I ask Bubble to dynamically count the number of tomatoes this user has and then add 3 tomatoes? Or another way to do it, which I don't, might be easier for me to manage, I could do part of it manually, is if I go to all plants, wherever it went. Oops, wrong button. If I go to all, this is a list of all plants. Right now there's this many entries, which is a lot. But if I went in and hard coded an icon with each one of these, then it would call that icon. I could go that way.
Well, but
you're by user.
But see, you have different kinds of tomatoes, but you want to show the same tomato image, right?
There's like 40,000 kinds of tomatoes. So yes, one tomato image. It's just to be delightful. It's not really to help you do much.
Right.
It's window dressing, but I think it's important because it's fun. But I don't think it matters if they're growing purple, Roma, big boys. You know what I mean? It's just, hey, I got 7 tomato plants.
Yeah. Huh. I'm just trying to think if it's going to be like a lot of searching on the page potentially and kind of slow, but I think what you can do is you can, because that's like an individual search in each cell, because you're gonna have to take the count of anything that's belonging to that user that is a type of tomato, and then count them all up.
Yep.
And then do it that way. So unless you're going to keep track of that separately, like the tally system that we talk about every so often, then that's how you're going to have to do it. But yeah, I would definitely store the type, like the option set type, on the user's plants.
Yeah.
So that then you can do a search for all of their plants with that type. And that's what's going to give you that number.
Yeah, that would be a lot faster. That's going to be a little tiny. Even if the person has a big vegetable patch, they're not growing 1,000. You know, like with all plants, that's so far nearly 1,000 records. It'll be probably 12 before we're done. So that's a huge difference in speed, I would guess.
Yeah.
All right. So, all right. Well, I think I need to figure out better how to get that icon. How to tell Bubble if it's called this, then it's a tomato. I kind of need.
Well, that's what I'm saying is the kind of plant that is going. So I always get a little confused with your database, Jay.
I know.
But whatever the data type is, that it's like my plant or something like that,
yes.
and that's what's in their bed or whatever, that is going to have a type, and it's going to be set to that option set, and you're going to be setting it to like, so if it's a heirloom tomato, it's still going to get the basic type of tomato.
Yes.
Right. So that's how it's going to be. Like, you're going to do the search for however many types basically that belong to each user.
I wonder, how about a keyword search?
That's not going to be reliable. I don't really think, like, comparing the name of their plant to the type.
Yes, if the name keyword is tomato, then show this.
Maybe, but I think that it's still not as clean. Before you actually launch live, you have an opportunity to start storing it properly, like as they're adding things to their gardens, right? So just go ahead and store it at the time that they create the plant in their garden, right? And that way you don't have to go and try to match it and make it work.
I'm just thinking about,
because you already have the plant types, right, in your database.
I'm not sure what you mean. What there's a number of ways that they're sliced and diced, quite a number of ways.
Right.
So I do have the plant types, and they are vegetable, tree, flower, herb. That's
right. But in your option sets where you have these particular icons, I forget what you're calling it.
Vegetable categories.
Vegetable categories. Okay. So every plant, like in your data type, you'll have a vegetable category for that kind of plant. And if it's a vegetable, it will be assigned to one of those vegetable categories. Right. And then when the person is adding, and that's something that you need to go through and just like add, right, to it. And then as the person adds that to it, you can inherit that into their My Plant data.
I'm a step behind you. I'm sorry. Can you back up and say that again?
Yeah.
I lost you.
Actually, I have to go to the restroom. I'll be right back, and then I will do it. Okay. Talk amongst yourselves.
Okay.
What's up, Jay? How you doing?
Hey there. How are you?
Good. Was just kind of tuning in and out. I had to like wash laundry and like do a little carpentry at work at home. It doesn't end. It's not in. Cameron was a really good presenter.
Yeah.
Speaks very clearly, to the point. A lot of information, but definitely to the point.
I just got 15 screenshots from my VA on things she found wrong.
Oh, damn.
No,
are you live yet? I don't think I heard that part.
Well, I mean, it's live because I needed it to be live so I could work on it, but I haven't shared it with anyone except for my VA yet.
Yeah. That's cool, though. At least you're moving in that direction.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm having a lot of issues with responsiveness.
Yeah. Watch you like finish, like you get it perfect, and then like the new engine comes out.
I'll cry.
Be prepared to cry, Jay. Be prepared to cry.
Yes.
Okay, so what I'm trying to explain is whenever the user is adding a vegetable to their garden, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
What kind of data is that? What data type is that?
My plants.
My plants. Okay. And the my plant is a type of plant, right? That is also inherited from somewhere else in your database. They're not adding they're not adding a new kind of plant.
They have that option, but
okay. But if they do, even if they do, then you could also give them, like, require them to choose the kind of vegetable that it is, right?
Yes.
If it's a vegetable, right? So what I'm saying is all of their my plants will have, if it's a vegetable, will be of type vegetable. And if it is of type vegetable, we'll have a vegetable category in that data type, right?
Yes.
Now what you do is on the page that you're going for, the repeating group will be kind of like we have with the colors, and it'll be the data source will be that option set of all the different vegetable categories.
Yes.
Right. And then what you're going to do is in each of those horizontal, like each column of that horizontal repeating group, then you're going to have that repeating group that I was talking about. And the search will be the number is going to come from, the list of numbers is going to be searching for all of the my plants of that user meeting that category, that constrained by that category.
Yes.
That's going to give you your number, and then you can show the pictures accordingly.
Yes. Okay. That makes sense. I understand it. Thank you.
Yep. It's tough sometimes, right? Like making sure that we're articulating exactly what we mean, but.
Well, I'm trying to make let me come back. I'm trying to make the add a plant process as simple as possible. And I'm really happy with it, because now that I have live data, including things like the brand name, it is really easy to add a plant, much easier than starting from scratch. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, it is. It makes me uncomfortable. I mean, to give them another step, but I think that maybe I can find a way to give them right before success, right before the last step, say, it looks like this plant is a tomato or whatever, and then show them that icon, and they can click yes or no. And if it's yes, then boom. And if it's no, then they can get a list of the icons. They can scroll through them, but this is what it is. Or they can search them, maybe. I don't know. I don't think that'll work. Speaking of searches, what again is the name of that, that thing? Well, let me show you how this is working really well. But slow. What's the name of that search thing? You've been Mealy. I know it's called Mealy.
Miley search.
M-I-E-L.
M-E-I-L. I search.
I-L-I. Have you guys tried it?
No, Thomas is thinking about maybe spending some time on it for us.
Yeah, I'll see if I can start this weekend. But I'm actually going to jump off, ladies.
Okay.
You guys have a nice one, okay?
Thank you. Weekend. Yeah, good to see you, Thomas.
Bye. Yeah. And then you just tell them how much you have of it, and that's it. That was only 4 clicks to add a plant, which I think
awesome.
Is great. So I don't mind adding 2 more clicks, but I kind of want to set an upper limit of clicks, and try to keep it really low, because I want people to get the app and then go grab their seed packets and start going, I got one of these, and just add their whole collection, their whole inventory, without it being a massive, it shouldn't be a Sunday afternoon project.
Right. Gotcha.
Anyway, that's awesome. Well, that gets me closer. I think for now, what I'm going to do is hide it.
Okay.
I've got other things on that page that are going to be horrible, not horrible, exciting actually, to work on. I want to do the Build-A-Bed, where they can set up their bed and drag and drop squares that represent sun, shade, or mixed, and then drop plants on them so that they know where their tomatoes are in their beds. And then next year at February, when they log in, they get, let us suggest your plant rotation, and everything moves over, all the icons move over one row. And the first row goes to the back, so that you're rotating your crops in your home bed. Mm-hmm. And it says, hey, here's where you should put your tomatoes this year.
Gotcha.
I have no idea how that's going to happen.
You'll get there.
The drag and drop. I don't really understand the drag and drop. I cannot remember his name, but that wonderful person who visited and helped.
Eli,
yes. Like I have that bingo game. Was it the bingo game? It was something else. He had me, and I found it. It works. And I was like, wow. But I went and looked at it and then tried to reverse engineer it to understand it better. And I'm like, how did that happen? I don't understand how that happened. So I'll be back with those questions after we launch. I'm not worrying about it for now.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited for your launch. I can't wait.
Feels like it's always going to be just a couple days away, but I never quite seem to get there because
but that's what the end of every like pregnant period is like, right? Like you feel like it's never going to happen, but then it does. So.
Well, I can't wait to share it with you guys. Well, I have one more question. I don't think there's an answer for this. It might be a bug. When I've got in my database, in my user database, me have my login, and whenever I go to log in only on mobile, it says that it doesn't recognize the user, but it works fine on my desktop.
Weird.
Have you seen that before?
Are you manually entering the password?
I've tried manually entering it, and I've tried using my password manager.
Yeah, definitely don't use your password manager when that's happening. And definitely make sure that you have your password correct. So have you tried resetting your password?
Yes.
From there? Okay.
Yes.
I have seen this problem. I have a client who's going through it right now, and he just got stuck. He can do it in Safari, but he can't do it in Chrome. Like he can't, like he's just kind of like stuck. So like resetting your site cookies just for that site. I hate it when people say, well, just clear your cookies or clear your cache. You're like setting somebody so far backwards when you do that. Like, I hate that that's an answer that people give. But you're using Chrome?
No.
As a browser?
Well, I'm using Brave on my desktop and it's fine, but on my phone, I'm using Safari.
Okay. Yeah, like resetting your cache, clearing your cookies. That's what people are going to tell you to do. I don't know why that problem would be happening. We can take a look at it next week.
I'm wondering if it has something to do with the fact that me as a user, my credentials were originally created, by me in the back end. And I'm wondering if I should just delete them and recreate my user credentials. I mean, it's no big deal. I just was kind of afraid to delete them because I kind of thought, what if I delete them and I can never get back in again?
Yeah, no, that could be that could be there's something like that. Yeah.
Okay. I'll give it a shot. I'll let you know if I can't get back in.
Okay.
Thank you so much for your help and also for arranging that visit from an expert. It was wonderful.
No, good. I'm so glad you liked it. I was wondering, I was like, is this good? Like, I knew it was good for me, but I'm like, I hope this is fine. Like, cause it was a very different format. So that's good feedback. I'm glad
I think it was terrific. And I'm going to make a note of when we watched it, when he was here, so that when I need to use Google next time, I'm going to watch that and walk through it because it was far more useful than the tutorials that are available, which skip a lot of steps by necessity.
Right.
That was 90 minutes and he explained things and he showed you. There were some parts I didn't quite understand in the beginning, but the rest of it was, I mean, it's just because the Google interface, what do I have to do? Do I have to sign up? It's a pain in the neck.
Yeah, it's all garbled at first when you're first looking at that stuff and you don't understand the vocabulary and you definitely don't understand the interactions, right? Because the documentation is always written one-sided. It's from the API side, right? And then the documentation for the API connector or any tutorials that you find for the API connector are one-sided for the API connector, right? And that's like because Google's API has no idea what kind of platform you're using to connect with it, right? It doesn't know. It has to be agnostic. Right. And the tutorials for connecting the API connector to something like in general will also be agnostic. So finding good tutorials or good documentation that's specific to both the API connector and the API that you're trying to connect with can be tricky to find.
I think
and
probably,
like you said, skips a lot of information.
yes. I think my favorite takeaway was he said, read the documentation. Don't just be a skimmer, because I am also a skimmer.
Me too.
Thomas also, before he had to leave, he mentioned how much he appreciated that help. That person.
Oh, good.
I can't remember. What was his name again? That was
Cameron Wilder Booth.
Cameron Wilder Booth. I got to write it down.
And he's local to me. He's here in Tucson. I've never met him in person, but I think it's cool. I know another bubbler in Tucson.
Well, I bookmarked his Calendly because when I finish Garden Brain, I may return to Goldfish and try to get some help with that API.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Nightmare.
Yeah. He mentioned ADHD, but he's got the perseverance to stick with something when he's motivated. He'll figure it out. So
awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much. I hope you have a wonderful weekend.
Yep. And we'll be back here on Monday morning at 10 a.m. Pacific time for anybody who's watching the live or the replay. If you would like to join us for a complimentary session of CoCreative NoCode's office hours, please go ahead and email us at team@CoCreativeNoCode.com, and we'll get you over a set of credentials, and you'll be able to join us and say hi to Jay and Thomas and Kim and whichever other members decide to join us that day. All right. Thank you so much for being here, Jay. And thank you again to Cameron Wilder Booth for being here and going through a wonderful tutorial of how to use the API connector with Google's OAuth and the YouTube API. And I'll see you everybody next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.